Hello, 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 and welcome to the 25th episode of Mixed Media Reviews. My name is Kelsey, and today I'll be talking about a TV show. And this week's TV show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Today's episode is going to be slightly different. I'm still going to do kind of a general sort of review, but it'll mostly be my top 5 favorite episodes of Buffy. Of course, this is going to be a spoiler-heavy episode right away. I have seen the entirety of Buffy probably too many times to count. The first episode I really remember seeing was Anne, the very first episode of season 3. Buffy had run away and changed her name to Anne, which is her middle name, and tried to live a life without being the Slayer. But she realized she can't run away from who she is. I remember the scene where she's in wherever the other side of that black goo stuff is, when she goes to save, I don't even remember the other girl's name. And they're in some slave work mine or something like that. I don't even know. But there's a scene where she's standing on top of some kind of machinery, and the camera is kind of above her and pans down and around her. She's holding this axe weapon thing in one hand and a hammer in the other. There's lights that periodically hit her face, and she just looks so cool. I think I was at my grandma's house when I first saw it. I'm not quite sure, but what I do know is that is the moment that I fell in love with this show. It may have been a rerun or could have been current. I'm not entirely sure because we did not get the station at home that had Buffy. But I do know that I was watching it in 8th grade when the final season was on, and I had a friend of mine tape the episodes so I could watch them at home on VHS, since we, didn't get the WB or UPN or whatever channel it was on. And then in high school, too, I remember that it used to have reruns all the time on FX, and that is how I watched the majority of the show, was the 2 episodes a day that it played in the afternoon when I got home. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was about a young teenage girl whose destiny was to be the Vampire Slayer. In each generation, a Slayer is born, yada yada yada. And, she was that Slayer. Together with her watcher Giles and her friends Willow and Xander, Buffy saves the day. A lot. Or at least that's what her gravestone said. A quick what I liked critique section here for you guys. I loved it all. Nothing to critique, and that's it. I mean, this was a show in the late 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't common to have a show based on a female superhero. She was strong, funny, girly. She had flaws, she had weaknesses. I mean, this show may be a little corny at times, and it may have episodes that aren't particularly my favorite, and it may have an entire season that I'm not super fond of, looking at you, season 4. But it is still my favorite show of all time, and I think it still holds up. I think so many episodes are still so good, and even watching it for the first time, I think many people would still fall in love. Maybe the fashion has changed. Maybe some of the dialogue is a little cringy, but all in all, it's still a, chef's kiss of a show. Now let's talk top 5. I can't really pick the order, a real order of top 5, so I'm just going to do it in chronological order. This was super difficult to choose, and there were a lot of alternatives, but I think these are a pretty good roundup of my faves, and I tried to make sure that they were throughout the show and not just from my favorite seasons. The first episode is Halloween, Season 2, Episode 6. I put this episode on the list because I honestly just love it. I was absolutely obsessed with Buffy's costume for so long. In fact, I think I might still be obsessed with it. It has been a dream costume of mine that has just never come true. I just love it so much, and I can still picture it clear as day, and I one day will for sure dress up as Buffy as an 18th century girl. If you can't remember this episode, this is the Halloween episode where people begin to turn into their costumes that can all be traced back to one shop, owned by an Ethan Rayne. Buffy's costume was, of course, an 18th century gal. Willow was a ghost. Xander is a soldier, and Cordelia is, well, Cordelia in a cat costume. This episode also introduced us to Giles' past and the idea that maybe he wasn't always a squeaky clean watcher. I like when we get to learn more about his past, though band candy is way too cringy to ever be on this list. We also get to see that Giles can be pretty, BA when he's grilling or torturing Ethan for information. And I love that we get a little bit more backstory on him. And I just, like everyone, I love Giles. The best father figure a girl could have. We also get a little bit of a hint of Oz in this episode, and I love Oz as well. I mean, I love him on his own. I love him with Willow. I just don't really care who he's with. I loved his character, and of course Seth Green is amazing. So yeah, definite bonus for this episode. Mostly I included this episode because it's just kind of fun. Buffy definitely had the format most of these shows have, a big bad villain arc for the season, as well as the monster of the week type of episodes. This is definitely a monster of the week type of episode with, a hint of the big bad in it, since we do get some Spike, and I think that's fairly typical as well, to be a little bit of both. Unlike a lot of other shows, looking at you, Supernatural, and especially X-Files, I think Buffy continued to have a good mix of these thrown in each season. We had some that were, straight monster of the week types, we had some that were more of the mix, and we had some that were straight big bad. And I really appreciate that they were able to kind of do that throughout the show, and that they didn't just focus on the bigger and bigger big bad each season, trying to top itself. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but Buffy definitely didn't fall into that trap like the aforementioned Supernatural and X-Files. I mean, Buffy went from battling a god in season 5 to battling a job at a fast food restaurant in season 6. And that may sound very anticlimactic if you haven't seen the show, but it was so perfectly executed. They knew how to dial it back after going big, which is something that shows can't always do, to the point that sometimes the Monster of the Week episodes are better than the big bad ones. Definitely X-Files, definitely season 10, and 11. We won't talk about it. The second episode, let's talk about Becoming Part 2, the season 2 finale. Becoming Part 2 is such a good episode, and I think it is a good mix of some big things that happen throughout the show, kind of hints of what's to come or general themes for the show. This is when we get a taste of Willow's power, when she does the spell to give Angel back his soul, and it kind of overtakes her. We've seen her do magic before, but they were always for smaller things. This spell is huge. And we kind of see her falter at first, until her true power rises from within and she starts chanting in Latin or something to do the spell. And this is where I think magic really gets a hold on her, and it's something we continue to see throughout the show as her power grows, and so does her attachment to it. Culminating, of course, in seeing red, and then the rest of season 6 after that episode. It's also, I think, a really good example of the sacrifices Buffy makes and continues to make. And it's why she's also kind of tried to run from it more than once. In the pilot episode, we see her trying to escape her destiny, of course, and in the first episode of season 3, Anne, she tries to run away again. Of course, this isn't the biggest sacrifice she'll make, but it's still a big one. She kills the man she loves to save the world. She isn't killing Angelus in the end, but her Angel, the man she fell in love with. Not the one who killed Jenny, who tortured her and her friends, but he changes back too late, and the mouth of that creature statue thing, I can't remember its name, is opening, and the only way to close it is with Angel. I also really like the parallel between her and Angel, or at least her in the future of Buffy. They both end up in another dimension after dying and then coming back. In Angel's case, it was not a good place, and it's the reason why Willow brings Buffy back, because she fears the same thing happened to her. It's a nice nod to, I think, this episode, later in season 6 when they do bring her back. I like that it's something that, informs the future, I guess. I also love that Spike is a bad dude, but he still doesn't want the world to, end. And so he teams up with Buffy. And the absolutely iconic moment of Joyce and Spike talking, where she asks if they've met and he mimes her hitting him in the head with the axe and saying, "Get the heck away from my daughter." I almost included School Hard in this list for that just for that like specific scene, and I guess also, for the introduction of Spike. But honestly, Becoming Part 2 references it, and we get the hilarious awkwardness between the two as well as, kind of everything else that I've mentioned. So Becoming Part 2 for sure won out. Let's talk about the third episode. Hush, Season 4, Episode 10. Okay, I know I said Season 4 is my least favorite, but I mean, it's Hush. A list can't exist, I rhymed, without Hush being on it. Hush was the episode in Season 4 where the demons, called the Gentlemen, come to town to steal everyone's voices and collect 7 hearts. Hush was so freaking good. Hush was a great Monster of the Week episode where they also had big plot points happening, because nothing in Buffy is ever superfluous. And of course the big plot point being that Buffy and Riley find out about each other. But who cares about Riley? Am I right? It's also, of course, about Xander and Anya's relationship, as well as Willow and Tara's kind of introduction to each other. Anyway, Hush was so good because after like the first 13 minutes, there's no dialogue, and it's great. It opens with a weird, awkward dream sequence that I could probably do partly without, but it ends with a girl singing a lullaby, a super creepy lullaby that 100% sets the tone for the episode, which is why I love this episode. And of course, that lullaby and the dream sequence is, again, I love when we get to see, Buffy's prophecy dreams. And I feel like we don't get those super often, so it's always fun when those pop up. Anyway, back to the creepiness of this episode. There may be only like a handful of episodes that are genuinely creepy. Obviously, the dummy one, the puppet show in season 1, comes to mind. And Hush is certainly the most creepy, at least for me. The way the gentlemen move, their faces, those big smiles and their silver teeth, their fingers, it's all so terrifying and just completely unsettling. Their doctor bags, the way that they creak when they open, their creepy little minion things with their straitjackets, and that first jump scare when Olivia, who's Giles' friend, who I don't know if we ever see again, when she sees them through the window, it gets me every single time. Because you see the one in like the background, and then the one in the foreground. So creepy. And the way that they just like hover, it's so good. I can't. And then when the 2 gentlemen are going down the hallway in the dorm and they're like saying no to each door and then come to the one that they like, it's just so good. I know I keep saying it, but it's just that good, you guys. If you've seen the episode and you know how terrifying that first kill is, trying to scream for help but unable to make a sound, the door's wide open, because no one can help you even if they came past, because no one can say anything or do anything to stop anything. And while these 2 creeps are holding you down, the other 2 creeps slice you open to take your heart. And also the way the one gentleman just holds that scalpel, I know you can picture it. I know I don't even have to say anything else because I know you can picture the exact way he's holding that scalpel. So creepy. I also really love how dumb everyone is at first. Xander tries calling Buffy, and she answers and tries to say hello, and then we both get her and Xander's faces being like, "I'm an idiot. Why did I expect that this was gonna work?" I like that Xander also blames Spike. And I like that Riley and Forrest try to take the elevator where you have to speak to confirm your identity, and then when they finally get the override code right and pour out of the elevator, we just get Walsh point to something to the right, and it's a sign that reads, "In case of emergency, use stairway." And it's perfect. It's perfect Buffy humor. And I love that even in a super creepy episode, it can still be humorous. And of course, we can't forget the scene where Buffy tries miming staking the gentleman through the heart, and of course, Giles' beautiful drawing of Buffy. And later when Buffy and Willow are walking through the town, when everyone's kind of freaking out, the disdainful look that they share when they see the message boards are being sold for $10, just to immediately cut to the next scene of them walking through the door with both of them having message boards around their necks. It's just great. I love it. And everyone is just great at acting in this episode. I mean, they always are. I love everything, of course. But without the use of dialogue, I mean, there's dialogue, but nothing's, spoken aloud. You can easily see what they're saying, and they all convey what they're feeling in their faces just so well. As much as I dislike the initiative, although Adam was pretty cool, this episode is a great parallel between, Buffy and Riley. We see Buffy and Riley wanting to tell one another, and of course, we see the parallel between Walsh and Giles kind of getting the information across to them, and her saying, oh, we got to be out in the streets because there's going to be chaos, and just all of it, I think, flows really nicely to see how kind of similar they are, even though they both feel the other's wrong. What else? And of course we get the first kiss between Riley and Buffy, because when you can't say what you want, sometimes the action has to speak for you. That was the beginning of Riley and Buffy. We also get a lot of Spike and Giles banter in this episode. I love when he's living with Giles, and this episode has, a good bit of it. And of course the scene where Giles is trying to get Xander to watch Spike for the weekend, like, you babysit him, I've got somebody coming over. And the bit where he's like, are we out of this Weetabix? I don't know, it's a British wheat cereal thing. That whole conversation's pretty funny. Okay. Now let's bring it down for everybody. I think everybody knows what this episode's going to be. Season 5, episode 16, The Body. You guys, obviously this is the worst episode ever, but also, like, in the best way, it's the worst episode. I know I don't even have to summarize this episode, but just in case, it's the episode where Joyce dies. That's all you get. Oh boy. This episode is a doozy. I can't even with this episode. I cry every single time. I was just watching, like, bits and pieces of it to, like, write down things that I liked and to refresh my memory. And even doing that, like, I was already bawling like a baby. That opening scene alone is just enough to get me going. The way she's slowly realizing what she's seeing with Joyce on the couch, her voice breaking, her calling her mom and then mommy. And then after that, opening credit sequence, we're launched right into a memory. Like, such disjointed. We go from silence, because there's no background music this entire episode. We go from silence to, the traditional opening sequence with the Nerf Herder song, to a memory at Christmas time where everything's happy and there is actually background music in this scene. And then right after that memory, it cuts when she's trying to cut the pie and it falls and her and Joyce go, oh, and then it immediately just cuts straight to Joyce lying there lifeless. It's so good. It may be my favorite episode in the entire series, but, like, unofficially my favorite, because while super sad and terrible, it's also so beautifully executed. Like, this should have won awards because it's that freaking good. Everything is done so well. Like I said, there's no background music the entire episode. So right away, the entire episode feels much quieter. It feels much more, like, unnatural, which is weird because there's not real music in real life, But it's so good. And that first scene after the credits is just such a nice long shot. And there's more long shots throughout, or at least they make you feel like they're long shots, because there's nothing. I don't know how to explain that, but I'm just going to continue because I don't know how to explain that. But there's that long shot, which is nice. It makes you feel disjointed, you're following her. And of course there's no other sounds besides how her feet hit the carpet, or, when she's tearing off a paper towel after she threw up. And like, there's no extra sound. It's just, it is what it is. And it's very disconcerting. And then you pair that with that long shot, and it just makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel like you're right there with Buffy, discovering her mom's body. And the way that Buffy wavers between kind of knowing what to do and not knowing, how she calls 911 but then leaves the phone when she's given a direction, you know, the way that she hears the crack and then immediately jumps back to, oh, I was on the phone, there's someone there that can, you know, answer this question about it, blah, blah, blah. The way the outside noises kind of get picked up at this point, and we hear a car outside, we hear the birds chirping, you know, it's like Buffy's focus is kind of shifting between the silence in the house, the noise, and the distractions kind of outside. You know, then the sudden calmness that washes over her as she realizes she needs to call Giles. How she, you know, kind of has that disconnectedness with her voice and her dialogue, the way she speaks to Giles, you know, she's at the house. It's so good. And how she then, like, clings to the phone when she hangs up, and, like, that's her lifeline as she waits for the paramedics to come. The scraping of the table as the paramedics move it. The dialogue between the paramedics and Buffy trying to ascertain what's happening, what's going on, the equipment that they're using, making the sounds, the kind of the false sequence of events that get smashed together as she imagines her mom, you know, being okay, and then her waking up and going in the ambulance at the doctor station, just to cut right back to Buffy, cut right back to Joyce, and to the silence of the two paramedics working on her. Like, I can give a play-by-play for this entire episode, because just every single thing that happens is just perfect. Every shot, every out-of-focus thing, every piece of dialogue, the way the camera moves, the framing of the people, like her talking with the paramedic after them, you know, calling it, and his face not being fully in the shot, him being kind of blurred out as he walks up to her. Like, it's all so well done. I feel it so hard with this episode. And then when Giles comes, you know, her kind of freak out and her coming to realization when he starts kind of touching Joyce and freaking out because he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know the paramedics have already been there. And then when Buffy screams out to him, "We're not supposed to move the body," just like instant tears every time. Like, her face, Giles's face, when Giles like runs to her and like embraces her, and like her face of just realizing what she said, you know, calling it the body. And of course, Buffy then going to tell Dawn at school is also perfect. The focus on her kind of high school drama at first and how she feels like that's the end of the world. And then the camera following Dawn's charcoal as it goes down the page when she sees Buffy in her classroom. And the cut to the teacher's face, the statue, the kind of disconnectedness we're seeing and feeling through these shots. You know, we don't hear what Buffy says the moment that she tells Dawn, but we do hear everything that kind of leads up to it. We don't hear the actual words, though. It focuses on the view we see from her classmate's perspective on the other side of the glass. We don't hear Buffy say those words, but we hear Dawn's muffled no. We hear her muffled denial. We see Dawn collapse. Just talking about it, guys. You don't have to hear it, you know, fully to feel her pain. And you can see her pain reflected in her classmates and her teachers' faces. It's such a good scene. And I love the different reactions that everyone has to Joyce's death. You know, Dawn also, when they get to the morgue, she has to go see the body. She has to go see it to believe it. And that, it's so good. I like that Willow is frequently changing Tara's sad, kind of comforting silence, trying to kind of calm and be the rock for Willow. Xander's anger, but mostly I love Anya's reaction, because Anya's feels the most innocent, I guess, the most truthful, the most real. It's what everyone kind of thinks but never really says. The way she's, asking questions so that she can kind of understand because she doesn't get it, and Willow kind of snaps at her. And Anya's, just thinking about it, dude. Anya's like little monologue that she gives in that scene is just the most perfect thing. How she doesn't understand. She's newly human, so she doesn't really get it. But also I think it's just such a human reaction in general. Her, asking why she can't just get back in her body. She talks about, she's never going to be able to drink fruit punch or yawn or brush her hair, and she doesn't understand why, and no one's telling her, and everyone's reactions are all very different, and she doesn't know if she's supposed to react like that or react differently, and it's just unknown. And of course, after this scene, it gets silent again. Xander punches a wall. They all look at his hand like the blood is something like life, and of course Tara says to Xander, "It hurts, doesn't it?" And Xander just looks at her knowingly like yes, I need to feel something that I can attribute. Like, I need a physical pain. Like, the pain I'm feeling now isn't attached to anything. And so him punching something and feeling that pain, makes him feel like I'm allowed to be upset about this pain because it's real. It's something I can feel. It's something I can see. It's so good. And of course it pans over to the window at the end of the scene, and of course Xander's car is getting a ticket, and it's just it's so good. And I could probably talk about this episode all day, but I'm just gonna move on, because if I talk about any of those scenes anymore, I'm probably just gonna cry. So let's bring it to a happy point. In general, season 6 is, I'm pretty sure, my favorite season. I love that we see Buffy struggling with everyday things, from the flooded basement to the job at a fast food restaurant. We see Buffy face down a god in season 5. We see her sacrifice her life to save the world. And in season 6, we see her struggle to pay bills. She gets upset because a demon, destroys her coffee table, and she's like, how am I going to pay for this? How did my mom pay for this? And this is of course after her mother passes, so it's hard for her to find her footing. And that's not even taking into account that she had just been in a heaven-like dimension and brought back to life into a world that was literally on fire. And it's a great way to introduce some realism into the show, but I think it's also a great way to kind of bring Buffy back down to earth. I mean, how do you go from stopping a god? What could possibly be the big bad next? And it makes sense to have it be the real world. To just have some regular dudes be the big bad for that season. Because not everything's going to be a god that you're battling. Some things are just bills. But this is about Once More Feeling. Once More Feeling, of course, is in the top. I'm sure it's everybody's top favorite 5, top 3, I don't even know. But I love this episode. And it is such an incredibly important episode. I feel like lots of big things are happening, and yet it's still kind of a Monster of the Week episode. Though, to be fair, I think kind of most of season 6 is Monster of the Week. And I think a lot of shows that have musical episodes, they're kind of out of place, or they're not super important to the plot. Sometimes they're in someone's head. Sometimes it's more that it's just, an actual musical play that's happening, and that's why people are singing. But Once More Feeling makes a ton of sense. We're in a magical world, and the whole premise of this episode is that this demon comes to town, forcing people to tell her secrets until they burn. And the Scooby Gang is full of secrets at this point in season 6. Secrets that just need to get out in this episode. So not only does it flow well with the story, not only does it make sense with the world that they're in, but it has so many big, major points in this episode. First up, we have the hesitancy? That's a hard word to say. First up, we have the hesitancy that both Xander and Anya feel when it comes to them getting married. Kind of even for the same reasons. Anya is scared of entering into a marriage when she's seen so many of them fail. It was her literal job as a vengeance demon to fulfill the wishes of scorned women, and this includes one of Xander's exes, Cordelia. And of course, Xander is worried about messing things up, of failing Anya, of not being enough for her. All of this comes out, especially in their song, I'll Never Tell, which is a great little duet between them. Super cute, with meaningful lyrics, of course, and funny lyrics, of course. And while some of this is kind of dealt with in this episode, it kind of boils over and we don't actually really deal with their hesitancy until later on in the season. Then we have Willow and Tara. Tara's upset with Willow's magic use, as this season she's really been relying on it, and we even kind of see an addictive quality. And we see Willow kind of going down a darker and darker path. They have a fight, and Willow makes her forget about it. In this episode, Tara realizes that she had been under a spell and comes to the conclusion that she needs to leave Willow. And of course, it's in the best duet of the episode with Giles. Tara also is a wonderful singer, and so she gets the best songs. And her song to Willow, I still will sing because it's so pretty and I love it. Giles in this episode is, of course, wrongfully believing that he is only holding Buffy back, and that in order for her to really become an adult, a full Slayer even, he must leave her do it on her own. It's something that he's been kind of wrestling with, I guess you'd say, throughout the entire season, and it's things we've kind of seen bits and pieces of him kind of realizing. But this is the episode where, of course, that really comes to a head. He thinks she relies too heavily on him, counting on him to help raise Dawn and to even help with the house and everything else that kind of goes on. He thinks that by leaving, she'll have to step up, and maybe she just hasn't been fully in it since coming back. He's seen, he's had his questions about something's up with Buffy, and I think he believes that it's him holding her back and she's not able to fully embrace, being the guardian of Dawn, being a Slayer, having that kind of a life, I guess. And he thinks it's him holding her back from that and doesn't realize it has nothing to do with him, really. Dawn is in this episode and she dances. But seriously, her secret is that she's been coping by being a bit of a klepto, a fact that makes her the target of the demon sweets. She is believed to have summoned him because she'd taken the amulet necklace thing from the magic shop, when in reality it was Xander, because he wanted to know if his relationship would work with Anya or not, and he thought it'd be fun. But obviously things didn't go well. And it is kind of a funny thing, but at the same time people died. So he kind of killed people, and no one ever really brought that up. So maybe that's a little criticism. Anyway, then there's Buffy. Buffy, of course, is hiding the largest secret, and that's that Willow did not save her from some horrific dimension, but in fact, she was ripped out of Heavenly One, where she was happy and at peace, and now she's back in the land of the living and is completely miserable, where things are too bright and loud, and the only person she can really confide in is Spike. And she's been drawn to him a little bit. A lot bit. Buffy's big reveal at the end, her show-stopping number, which is always also a fun song to sing. It ends with her about to burn up when Spike steps in and brings her back. And at the end, Dawn quotes back Buffy's line to her when she jumped to her death to save the world at the end of season 5 and says, "The hardest thing in this world is to live in it." Dang, Dawn. Well, Buffy. Anyway, so at this point, Sweets is like, well, if Dawn didn't summon me, I don't really want Xander as my bride, so I'm just going to peace out, and he leaves. And this episode is just so great because not only are all of these huge secrets coming out and, getting handled in varying degrees, it's also just one of the better musical episodes to ever exist in any show ever, and I will die believing that for sure. We got a lot of great songs, and they're all incredibly catchy, and they all have a real impact on the rest of the season. They set things up, right? Willow is not done being addicted to magic. She is not done messing with Tara's memory. And Giles is not done believing he needs to leave. Anya and Xander are not in a great place in their relationship. Buffy is still trying to figure out how to exist in this world and how to kind of, I don't know, feel better. Which is why we get a kiss of Buffy and Spike at the end. Which, yes, we all love Buffy and Spike. But obviously super toxic at this point. And obviously not the best place for Buffy to be. I loved every single one of these songs. And I know I used to listen to the soundtrack in high school on repeat. My best friend and I would sing the songs in the car for karaoke, just constantly singing them. I remember even printing out the lyrics online so that we could memorize like every single line. I loved it. One of my favorite things about Comic-Con is that the final panel of the weekend is the Buffy sing-along, where they might hand out some little monsters to wear on our fingers, or maybe even just a button. And we all gather in a room and watch the episode together. Not only do we all sing along, but we quote the dialogue too, because we're all a bunch of nerds. And it's complete with Rocky Horror style calls and responses. I absolutely love it, and I kind of miss it. But yeah, definitely in the top 5. Okay, Bring On the Night, Season 7, Episode 9. Let's do this one quickly. Okay, I know I said 5. I know that, you know that. We all know that I said 5. But I just wanted to give a quick little bit of a shout out to Bring On the Night. Bring On the Night has one of my favorite, if not my absolute all-time favorite, Buffy monologues ever. I loved this when I first saw it, and I used to think about it like all the time because it's so iconically Buffy, but it's also just so incredibly powerful. So Bring On the Night is the episode where Buffy faces that Uber vamp and gets beaten down. Xander finds her, pulls up all the rubble to find her, like, unconscious under some, like, parts of a wall and crap. Like, near death for sure, almost dead, beaten down by this Uber vamp. To the point where the Scooby Gang is all scared, talking about how they don't know what to do, how Buffy was their last hope against the First, and she failed to fight against, one Uber vamp. The First is the biggest bad that they've ever faced because it is the bad that created those other bads. And while they talk about all of this, while they all sit and talk in fear, Buffy is upstairs listening in until she comes down to tell them that, they're kind of all right. She stands there bruised and cut, looking worse off than she ever has, and she tells them this is it. This is the end of the world. She's scared too. She's tired too. But she's not going to stop fighting. She says, I'm standing on the mouth of heck, and it is going to swallow me whole, and it'll choke on me. We're not ready. They're not ready. The music then starts to swell up, and she continues saying, they think we're going to wait for the end to come like we always do, but I'm done waiting. They want an apocalypse? Oh, we'll give them one. Anyone else who wants to run? Do it now, because we just became an army. We just declared war. And then, of course, she continues, and it's just so freaking good, but I don't need to quote the whole thing. But that line of, like, just the switch between it seeming like she's about to give up to it looks bad, it is bad, it's worse than we've ever freaking been, ever. We're all scared, we're all tired, we're all terrified of what's to come. But we're not going to freaking give up, and we're going to beat them, and we're going to do it together. And it's like the speech to end all speeches. I love it so freaking much. And then you pair it with the next episode where they all, like the Scooby Gang, come together to make a plan to take down the Uber vamp, to show the potentials that Buffy can win this fight, that together they can win this fight. And it's just so perfectly done. I almost did Showtime instead, but because, the whole plan, the way it gets together, the flow of the episode, the way it goes down, her, finally dusting the Uber vamp, it's all freaking epic. But to be honest, it's this speech at the end of Bring On the Night that really brings me in. Of course, I recommend the show since it's my favorite show ever and I constantly gush about it. I would love to do more episodes on Buffy. Maybe like one season, each episode where I talk about my favorites or my least favorites of the season, or maybe just my least favorites of the series or something, you know, like Wild Things. I think that's the only episode that would, that would be on the list. Probably not the only, but definitely number one. That's a ranked list I could probably do. Let me know if you like this style and if you'd like more, or if you want more Buffy episodes in general. And there you have it. Those are my top 5, or kind of 6, favorite episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast, and you can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, probably. Please join me next week where I will be reviewing a book, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye. Wait, just kidding. I forgot to say the author of the book. So next week's episode is going, and by next week I mean this weekend, in a few days. This weekend's episode is going to be To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. Okay, for real this time. Bye.